You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to What's the T-Bev, a Star Trek Universe podcast here on the BQN. I'm your host, Christos Generis. What's the T-Bev is a podcast where I interview members of the LGBTQIA plus community and our allies. We get to know our guest Trekdom and discuss current Trek news and speculation. And let me tell you, listeners, you are in for a treat because today we had the most Trek news drop on us than we have seen in a very long time. And I was just so happy that I was recording tonight. So this is Wednesday, March 27th, when I'm recording. And hopefully you will have this in your hands by the 28th or 29th. And this is all still very fresh in your heads. Remember, you can watch What's the T-Bev on our YouTube channel of the same name or listen wherever you get your BQN podcasts. Well, listeners, I want to introduce our guest for today and get right to it. A really good friend of mine who I met on last year's Star Trek cruise. Let's welcome Natali Gerani to the show. Well, hello, Natali. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm great. And I'm just excited because I did that transporter transition like perfect for the first time. So I'm already winning today. Well, thanks again for agreeing to come on. And listeners, I was supposed to record with Natali 2 days ago, but I had to postpone. And it actually was more serendipitous that I did because we got a lot to talk about tonight. Natali, why don't you start off by talking about, a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, where you live, whatever you feel like sharing.
So, I'm that Star Trek nerd you hear about all the time. I got into it really young. It's sort of my bread and butter. In my regular waking world life, I'm a paralegal at a law firm in Chicago. We just help people with bad cars kind of stuff. But the rest of the time, I'm like a lot of us. I rewatch the shows. I like keeping up with the news. I like seeing where it's going. And that's kind of been me for, oh goodness, I'm 34 now. 34 years.
You're young.
Oh, so young. I have friends who have been in the fandom longer than I have been alive, and that I'll always enjoy that because they are an endless source of stories that I will never turn down.
Yes. That is pretty true. We have a fandom that is now 58 years old. So that is a thing. And that's like one of the cool things about going to Star Trek conventions or cruises or whatever, because you literally meet people who only discovered Star Trek a year ago and people who have loved it for all 58 years and everything in between. Speaking of which, I met you on the Star Trek cruise, the 2023 cruise?
Yep, just last year.
Just last year, exactly. And you got to go on this year's cruise. I did not.
Yes, I did. It was a really good time, but missing some of those familiar faces.
Yeah. Well, I miss being there. So I'll take that you're talking about me.
Oh, so. Definitely. Definitely. Yours was one of the most missed faces.
And anything you want to tell us about these pictures here? Anything?
So let's start from the left. That's me and one of my partners, now husband, James. I, and my other partner have been together for coming up on 11 years. I have another partner, Solomon, who isn't into Star Trek, so he won't show up in any of these pictures. And then we move to the right, and there is a handsome someone with me standing as science officer behind him. And that was us last year. I think this was day 3, maybe. Like, I'm trying to remember when exactly I wore that costume, but the first cruise was such a whirlwind for me. It's kind of hard to place things in time.
It was a bit of a whirlwind. It's kind of funny. I was hunting through pictures from the cruise last year, and I recently lost 25 pounds. So it's like I see back at these older pictures, and I'm like, yeah, I was heavier than I thought I was.
Whereas
But
I went in the opposite direction. I'm heavier now, but I'm lifting.
for different reasons, much healthier reasons. But either way, we're both in better places. So that's the point. So, well, shall we jump right into our trekking to know you phase, which I'm really excited about because I'm sure we talked about some of this shit during the cruise last year, but my memory is shot and there was probably alcohol involved. So
Only a little.
not probably. I can promise you there was. So who knows what I remember about our many conversations. So this will be kind of fun, kind of interviewing you kind of for the first time here. So let's start off with our first question, and you gave a little bit away. What was your first contact with Star Trek? You did mention that you were pretty young when you first discovered it.
So I'll contextualize that a little. Both of my parents watched Star Trek, the original series, as it was coming out when they were younger. So I was born in 1990, and so Star Trek: The Next Generation was already going. And it was something that they would watch together, and by extension, I also saw it. And I got into it very young. And this was also, I mean, you just, in the space of a few years, you have Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager all hitting the screens. Star Trek Voyager is the one my mother and I bonded over the most. So you can just imagine from basically birth right up through 2001, I have a Star Trek series going on weekly, basically every day or every week for
So
years.
you didn't watch Enterprise?
I did watch Enterprise, and I will fight for Enterprise's place in Star Trek canon.
Well, then you had one going every day until 2005.
Yeah, but 2001 is when it stopped being about my parents and I watching Star Trek and about being my relationship with Star Trek.
I like that. I like that. And it was a very different series. So kind of, and you're kind of coming into your preteen years there.
Because that's so when I separate those eras in my head, I'm also talking about the fact that my mother didn't watch Deep Space Nine, but I did eventually start watching it on my own years later as reruns, and it went from something that I knew about to something that I loved and enjoyed on my own. So that's where that little I watched Enterprise. I watched it as it was coming out, and I was one of the ones angrily shaking my fist when I heard about the cancellation.
Yeah. That's very similar to mine. My dad introduced me to the Trek movies when I was very young, but TNG started when I was about 10, and that was very much my Star Trek. My dad did watch it with me sometimes, and he watched it too, but by then my parents were divorced, and I was not, it wasn't like it was like, oh, it was a weekly thing for us to watch Star Trek together. I might have been at my mom's house or my dad's house or just watching it by myself. So I get that, where that change happens with it. But I did remember my dad like showing me Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock and all that.
My parents actually had that old VHS collection of all the original motion picture as VHSs. So I grew up on those as well, and that I have that unique relationship with that. My parents divorced as well, and that's where I quickly figured out my dad likes Star Trek. My mother and I loved Star Trek.
Well, at least you got the like on both sides and love on one side there. So that's awesome. Well, I don't think you gave it away. I thought you might have almost revealed. What is your favorite Trek series?
That is really tough right now because we are in the midst of so much new Star Trek. So I actually had a really in-depth think about it. And I think right now, Strange New Worlds is my favorite. If I had to pick one from the original television era, so like
Pre
TOS,
pre
pre the
pre discovery.
yeah, pre-Discovery, it would be Deep Space Nine, hands down.
Okay.
Um,
Because because I think that must be like a different question. Like, because Strange New Worlds, and I love Strange New Worlds, it's not a completed series yet, so we don't have the whole context in which to judge it and compare it against others. In fact, we've only had 20 episodes compared to DS9's like 160 or 70 something episodes,
yeah, and we're also dealing with a property that on several occasions, like especially with the 90s series, they don't hit their stride until later, or sometimes they take wild changes. Like Deep Space Nine took a wild change in season two at the end of season two, and it became a much better series because of it. Strange New Worlds is starting out really, really strong, and so far I've absolutely adored everything I'm seeing out of it. So that might just be a factor of it being right now and being so well done and including so many stories that I love
Yeah.
that I have to divide that between the Discovery era, the everything post Discovery and everything before, even though it's the same universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Um, what is your favorite Trek episode?
So I almost use it as a litmus test.
Well,
I love the balance of terror.
ah, so what a treat for you when Strange New Worlds revisited Balance of Terror.
I I had to I was stopping the episode every 3 or 4 minutes because I would notice some tiny detail because of all the episodes of Star Trek, I have seen that one the most. Uh,
Interesting.
well, I appreciate its historical context and the ideas that it's dissecting, and then it's just so well. The action within it and the tension is so well executed that I mean, I would hardly be the first to say it's just one of the best episodes.
Yeah. I agree with you on that, especially, and I when I definitely say it's probably my favorite or top three episodes of the original series, which many listeners know is not my favorite cup of tea. There, um, I love the episode. The racism from the helmsman or the I guess it was appropriate for the time, but I don't.
Um,
That's where I get a little into that. I think as a leader, I would have handled that differently. If I were Kirk and that were just going on right there, I'd got rid of that guy a long time sooner.
there's also a lot of things in the original series that I just have to put within the context of their time that just
Yeah,
and even then it feels icky to do. So like the
yeah,
racism and the immediate suspicion of Spock the second we see that Romulans look like Vulcans. And it's like, yeah, but you know for a fact they haven't violated this treaty for 100 years. Like, how are you making this leap?
yeah. I mean, like humans look like Klingons back then, and we didn't assume every human was bad. You know what I mean? So come on. And I just thought of that. So
Yeah, like there's costuming conventions, and then there's the things that were more topical for the era, and Ooh, this probably will dovetail into what Star Trek means to me a little, but like if Star Trek isn't commenting on what's going on right now, then why are you doing it?
True. True. I like that. What is your favorite Trek movie? And when I say that, I include all 13 movies as in running for that.
For me, it's First Contact.
Aw, yay.
Um, I love the TNG cast. They are amazing. And the Borg are also one of my favorite, like, antagonist species. I love the more we understand them. And that is just
Yeah.
a really well directed movie with it's got good funny moments, it's got good action and good tension. It sets itself up very nicely, and um, it plays to me about as well as even the Wrath of Khan as far as Star Trek action sequences can go. Because the Wrath of Khan would be my next choice because it's Ricardo Montalban. Like you can't. I'm sorry, that's rich Corinthian leather right there.
Right there. Yeah, I mean, First Contact, Wrath of Khan, and Undiscovered Country, they're just like all like those. If you go to the original 10 movies, those are your. I mean, even go for me for all 13 movies. Those are the three that rise to the top right away. Um, but
The level of acting that's going on, the scripting, like the illusion. So if we're going back to First Contact, like that allusion to Picard as Captain Ahab, like, and
yeah,
then Undiscovered
I just
Country.
I just found out yesterday, and I guess I maybe knew this on some level that because First Contact did so well, they basically doubled the budget to for Insurrection. So Insurrection was a $70 million budget movie, which was by at the time the biggest budget of any Star Trek movie, and they still, I mean, effed it up. I mean, I like Insurrection on a level, but the story. I mean, I thought this when it came out, and people are still saying it to this day that it just kind of feels like an extra long TNG episode because it's just you know it doesn't have that polished feel that First Contact had, and that real cinematic feel.
I agree. I think when they did First Contact, they sort of bottled some lightning, and then they just couldn't land that again with Insurrection. The story parts are interesting, but the execution just doesn't feel as good. And then there are things that on screen just sort of play funky. Like you have this semi spiritual aspect of like experiencing a moment in time and that causing things around you to literally slow down.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
know, and yeah, and the freaky face stretching scenes, which were, I don't know, done for gore or effect. I mean, I didn't need that.
and like that is darkly gory for Star Trek, which is
Yeah,
interesting because we have the immediate predecessor showing us a Borg drone being assembled. And yet that still feels more approachable and less like gory than what they did to this admiral at the end of the movie.
yeah. It feels like what's happening with the Borg drone or the Queen, right? That's more sci-fi, whereas what's happening with you know Admiral getting his face stretched to is just gory horror. There's a line, and they crossed it.
Well, as much as I love Star Trek, there isn't a line they haven't found a way to stumble over.
True, true, and they'll continue to. Favorite character in all of Trek?
This is easy. Seven of
It should
Nine.
be. Ah, yay! Our queer character. Are you by chance reading Firewall at all right now?
I'm not. I'm terrible about keeping up with the books. I
Okay.
the most recent ones that I read were the trilogy that were written to wrap up the previous chronology. Um, and that was sort of the last time that I really engaged because it was just like them sort of winding the universe down, which was
Yeah.
fascinating because I like multiverse type stuff. But I haven't read Firewall.
Well, Firewall just came out, so you're not in trouble yet. But I'm not. I'm only. I'm doing the audiobook right now, and I'm only about 2 hours in. But it is definitely. It is a. It's first off, it's very queer heavy. I love it. Like it's exploring. It picks up about 2 years after Voyager returns home from the Delta Quadrant, and
Mhm.
it's going to tell the story of how Seven ends up in the Friend Strangers. So it's literally it's a Picard novel. So,
Then I have
but
to
yeah,
read it.
yeah. So it's literally quote unquote. I mean, and you can't call it canon. It'll be canon until it's not, as I like to say with some of these novels. But it's a Picard novel, and it's a post Voyager, pre Picard, and basically it's going to tell the story of you kind of find out right away that Seven's been denied access to Starfleet, and Janeway's pissed, and so far Janeway's in the novel too, and there's some really cool things, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing it and maybe probably even doing a little bit of a review. But it's not pulling any punches with talking about the queer side of Seven and her discoveries with that and things like that. So look forward to hearing what you think.
I'm excited for that because she's a character I identify a lot with, just because of how she had to learn a lot of social aspects. As hilariously as they would play some of them with the Doctor, it just really endeared her to me, and not in
Yeah,
an outs. It was less the outside superior observer incident we got with Spock, and Data never really felt like he fit because he actually lacks emotions. Seven is feeling them, but she's choosing not to acknowledge them because she doesn't know how to. And that's scary for her. In a lot of the episodes, they deal with that.
Seven reminds me of what it feels like to be gay at work sometimes. You know, in a
That's
not gay. I mean, my industry's changed a lot, but it wasn't always the most friendly toward gays. So, especially back then, it just reminds me of like being different, but you're different but you are who you are, and you're unapologetically you, and that's Seven.
uh, For me, it was identifying heavily with this character who relied on a logical framework to approach her emotions because she wasn't comfortable with her emotions. And then I started
Yeah,
realizing, wow, Natali, you do that too. You just do it because you're autistic. And also, she was just a fascinating character. The only other person who was ever in the running for that was Kira Nerys from DS9 because she's got one of the most fabulous arcs in all of Star Trek.
I love Kira. Literally, I probably have mentioned this before on this podcast or some other one, but episode one, Emissary, pilot of DS9, Kira was my favorite character right from the get go, and that never changed for the run of DS9. Like to
I
call that right, yeah,
Yeah, I cannot think of a single Kira Nerys episode or moment where I didn't genuinely enjoy the performance that Nana was putting into it, or that I didn't have to grapple with why I disagreed with her. Like
yeah,
why is what she's saying right now overstepping to me? Because she has a different lived experience. And she goes from this, talking about episode one, and she goes from this hard line, absolutely uh black and white universe character to this very, very nuanced character that these books you were talking about, 9 times out of 10 I hear that they frame her as becoming the next Kai of the Bajoran people. And you can see that path very clearly by the end of DS9.
I mean, she was the poster child for living with PTSD before we ever called it that. She literally was, and we saw that a little bit now in her little her little cameo in Lower Decks. They kind of make light of that, and then with her and Shax and whatnot. But yeah, for sure, her journey, and you can totally see her becoming Kai. So
yeah,
yay, Kira.
Kira Nerys, Kai of the Bajoran people, 2026.
Yeah. 2402. Legacy. I'm putting her in Legacy.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, so let's see here. You said, well, I don't know. You might have actually been the first person to stump the next question. So I always follow up, who is your favorite character with who is your favorite captain? But your favorite character is now a captain. But we haven't really seen much of Captain Seven yet? Not really. So I'll ask the question, who's your favorite captain?
So this is going to dovetail nicely. My favorite captain actually is Janeway. For most of the same reasons. I think her and Seven's interactions contribute heavily, but I also just like I like that she is a different captain, and not because of the very stereotypical, it's like, oh, she's a woman captain. It's like, no, she's a captain who came up through the science division. And you see that in the approach she takes to almost all the problems they encounter on Voyager.
Yeah.
She's not afraid to make a command decision. It's like, okay, we have to fire on them. But like, if there's a technical solution, she's willing to hear it out, and she contributes to the conversation in a knowledgeable manner, which we never got out of Picard. We never got out of Benjamin. We never got out of Kirk. They knew some things so that they did not appear to be completely uninformed next to their science officer, but we didn't really have a science officer on Voyager unless you want to count like 7 of 9, sort of.
She kind of filled that role later. I'd agree with that. And we hadn't really seen that again until like Burnham, right? Burnham's kind of that same. She's got that science background, and we see her as a captain be able to problem solve that way. But you knew Janeway was different right back in Caretaker when they get thrown, they're 70,000 miles away. The chief engineer is dead. Janeway goes down to engineering and fixes the warp core breach or leak, the crack in the warp core. Janeway's the one that's like, okay, power down the warp core does this, seal it up, start it back up. I'm like, Picard couldn't do that.
Well, I mean, and we also find out Picard familiarized himself with the Enterprise. But Janeway, in like several episodes, makes it a very clear point. She memorized Voyager. Yeah. She memorized as much of the technical details of the ship as she could possibly muster before taking captaincy. Even going one time, I was just watching Relativity, where we see her make this claim. She could walk the decks blindfolded.
Yeah. Except that time that she goes, remember, I forget the name of the episode where she has the missing, they identify the 4 crew members that have been kind of left behind. And I think, so they decide they're going to go like, it's like an HR episode or whatever. Like, these people aren't performing at their best. And so she's going to take them on an away team mission because they've never been on an away mission. So she goes down to deck 15 and she's like, it was obvious that she was kind of lost and didn't know her way. So that was obviously written in for impact.
Yeah.
But that just comes to my head. And it makes me realize I do know more about Voyager than I give myself credit for, because I can remember that kind of crap.
in the middle of rewatching it. So I just mentioned Relativity, so I'm still in season 5. Um, and I for having mostly just remembered from what I watched when I was watching through with my mother, and I've maybe watched it all the way through one other time. It holds up really well, and I'm surprised how much of it I still just remember pretty cleanly.
Yeah, it's a good show. All right, fun one now. Who is your favorite? Who's your Star Trek crush? Who's your favorite crush?
This is gonna make me sound real Johnny come lately. Ethan Peck as Spock can get it, but Leonard Nimoy could have always gotten it. um,
So you like the nerds?
I like. I tend to like the actors who portray Spock. It's like they're 3 for 3.
Yeah,
Ethan Peck, Leonard Nimoy, Zachary Quinto. If you took that off the table from me, my Star Trek crush growing up would have been a hard time because I couldn't I can't I just don't think of any of the male characters that way.
okay. That's a fair. I mean, you gave me an answer, so that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's Spock, and you're right. They've done well with all three Spocks. I've not disliked any of the Spocks. I've totally accepted Quinto and Ethan Peck as Spock, and don't have a problem with that.
I think I think Quinto nailed the mannerism in a post Vulcan world. Like they really I think they hit the nuance of that pretty nicely. And Ethan Peck is just he's just knocking it out of the park with this slightly hilarious, less put together Spock who you see every bit of Nimoy's performance in. It's an interesting threading of the needle. It's like he's not there yet, but almost.
Yeah, and it keeps getting more there. So yeah, that's the kind of cool part about it, and that's what kind of even like you say, oh, it's another prequel, and we're but we know some of these people. Why are we doing this? But it's adding a lot of context to the characters, which is cool.
And to be fair, we only know Spock. We saw all these other characters in the pilot and never again.
True.
Because even Captain Pike, like, you can't tell me we're comparing the Captain Pike character in the cage to the Captain Pike in the chair.
Yeah.
Those
Oh, no. I mean, we did see Pike in the Kelvin movies, but this is also a very different Pike.
Yeah,
So,
I think they've benefited from the fact that they really get to write their own version of the character every time they reintroduce him.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And even Spock, as he gets further away from Nimoy, it's doing that, like because Quinto did it. He did a lot just like Nimoy, but he did a little bit different. And I think while Peck is also playing off Nimoy, Quinto gave him a license to also, okay, someone else has broken this wide open, and I don't have to be just him. I can be a little bit me. So it's cool.
I don't think we're ever going to see Vulcan performances in the style of Nimoy or Mark Leonard ever again, and I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm sad or happy about that because they set such a gold standard that anyone else trying to hit any more nuanced and it's like, oh, you're not playing a very good Vulcan. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
the comparison you're making is unfair in most cases.
Yeah. I would also throw in Kirstie Alley Savick with that because she was pretty, even behind the scenes playing half Romulan, half Vulcan, which we've talked about before on this show, but she was very coached by Nimoy, you can tell. And, her performance was like, good stuff. I actually just ordered my Exo 6 Savick,
Oh,
the big doll. I've never ordered one of those before, but I had to order Savick.
I do not need to start an X06 collection because it'll start taking up more room than the Lego collection.
I'm kind of afraid I may be opening Pandora's box, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. What's your favorite starship? Because starship design is so fun.
So one of the things that I love about Star Trek is the starships. I'm a big technology in that type of sense nerd. I like design and the mechanics and the fake engineering of it. And I keep coming back to Voyager, and it's more of a gut love of this purely smart, fast exploration ship. Because for sure, you've got the Enterprise D as this big, beautiful galaxy class. You've got the Enterprise E as the sleek, huge sovereign class, which showcases well in the movies. The Defiant is a philosophical discussion in and of itself, because that's a warship, and Starfleet's not supposed to build those. And there's so many to pull from. And I just keep coming back to the fact that the Intrepid class in and of itself is meant to be all of this innovation, all of this, like, getting back to the science of it. Let's look at the universe kind of ship, out to be on the fringes, sort of like the old Constitution class. It's meant to operate at the far edges and not see the Federation and not see Starfleet for weeks, maybe months at a time. Now, obviously, in Voyager's case, that went a bit farther than intended, but it really just proved the class to be, as much as a ship is also its crew, they had one of the best ships to work with.
Yeah. And it needed to be, because they were going to be away from any sort of Starfleet support too. So and it was kind of the anti-galaxy class too, in a sense, right? It's like this much smaller, but just as powerful type ships,
I mean, its cruising speed is almost a whole warp factor higher.
Yeah.
It was this sleek, well-designed, frankly beautiful for the design aesthetic of the mid-90s, just beautifully put together. And it's just, it allowed them to tell interesting stories because they threw in all these weird innovations that they can then tell stories around, like the bioneural gel packs, these hyper sophisticated holodecks, which we all know, we all groan about a holodeck episode, but tell me a Star Trek series that hasn't done well with holographic episodes.
Yeah. Voyager. Love it. Favorite uniform?
This goes back to there's a post-discovery and a pre-discovery choice.
Okay, you can answer it. You can give me two.
Pre-discovery choices, the uniforms from the movies slap. The Next Generation movies with the
first
gray
uniform.
Mm-hmm. They hit that just close enough to a military uniform look that it makes sense, sort of like the Maroon Monster back in the original movies.
Yep.
They look more like a uniform while still being that Star Trek costumey look, because it's still just a jumpsuit. It's still wildly impractical for space wear, but it nailed the aesthetic. It hit all the points, and it just looks good on most people. Everyone I've ever seen dressed up in one of those just looks like just dusted amazing. Post Discovery, since I think they have done a phenomenal job in Strange New Worlds of recapturing the aesthetic of the original series while massively updating the uniforms. The detailing in the arms being for the different divisions, and then just the way the uniform sits now. Those classic TOS style shirts that fit no one right, those have been replaced with what actually looks like a uniform. And
it's enough that it looks so familiar to you, but it's, it's better. And I love that we saw the first iteration of these uniforms in season 2 of Disco, and they, as good as those were, they didn't look very comfortable, to be honest with you. So they evolved it a little bit to be the neckline, obviously, and to be more comfortable for the actors, I think, and to maybe tie the disco blue uniform, because those were a little bit the same collars as those, to the getting you to the original TOS episode uniforms. So it's almost like it was a step in between.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell that they were wanting to give that original series tricolor look, but still in the Discovery era uniform convention. It was a really interesting, when we first saw it, I absolutely loved it. And now when I see what they did with uniform to make it sleeker and more, I guess, even closer to the original series in Strange New Worlds, I almost wish they had just skipped that stage, not because it looked bad, but because it's just like you're still trying to look too much like Discovery's uniform, even though I know you're trying to get away from it. Just be a little braver. You can make the jump.
And they did. All right. Last question, and I know you touched on it a little bit, so maybe just wrap up that one with, what does Star Trek mean to you?
Star Trek is an allegory about right now. It's trying to tell it in the future, but it's an allegory about right now. If it's not beating you over the head with moral problems that apply to to the exact moment right now, it's taking a breath so that it can do it the next episode.
Yeah. Ad Astra per Aspera.
Ad Astra per Aspera.
That's the top 5 episode for me of all Star Trek already. So, kudos.
I mean, it's the first time in Star Trek's history that I went from the beginning of an episode with no tattoo idea to the end of an episode saying, "Well, I have to get this." Not I'm going to consider it, maybe wait a year, soul search a little. It's like, no, I'm getting Ad Astra per Aspera somewhere in my body when time and money permits. It's just a brilliant, brilliant episode.
I love it. All right. So that is Trekking to Know You, everybody. So we're going to jump right into Star Trek news, because boy, do we have some. So I guess at this point, we'll just start off with a reminder that Disco is back on April 4th with a 2-episode premiere of season 5 and its final season next week. We've talked about this a lot. And what are you looking forward the most, Natali, on about season 5 coming up?
They're saying that it's going to be like their biggest story yet, which is pretty impressive to me considering we've saved the galaxy a couple times. I am excited to see where they're landing these frankly amazing actors and actresses on their characters' emotional arcs. Because, like, where do we end with Burnham? Like, Burnham's probably one of the most changed characters in Star Trek to me.
True.
And we have Tilly, who I absolutely adore, absolutely love. Um, I just I just want to know where these characters are gonna go, and I don't need it to be a tidy, happy, off into the distance, happy. Sorry, I repeated myself. Um, happy ever after.
Yeah.
But like, what is if you're gonna tell the biggest story ever? Tell me the biggest story ever that brings me to the end of their emotional arc at the same time.
I think as we understand it, between the season and the epilogue they're going to give us at the end, we're going to have a nice, nice wrap up to things. So I'm looking forward to it. Um, Listeners and viewers, you can look forward to Let's Fly here on the BQN starting Friday the 29th with a kind of a countdown episode, and then the following week with a episode where we will do an episode recap the day after the episodes drop on Paramount Plus. So looking forward to that. All right. Next bit of news we're jumping to is this Variety article that dropped today. When I say today, I guess I'm talking March 27th, which was just riddled with Star Trek news and information about everything that's happening in Star Trek. Wow, it was just talk about update. It was. I think I was still digesting it right up to the point where we started recording. So
I was having to speed read to try and get caught up between the end of work and now. Like I didn't have a minute, and like it just kept something new every paragraph.
yeah, like and it big. Every paragraph was something big. So we'll start with breaking it down with the three, I should say, big screen movies or large screen movies that are in development. We have confirmed that Star Trek 4, which is our Kelvin timeline movie, is still coming, apparently. They have a new writer, Steve Yockey, and that movie's still moving along. We have a Star Trek origin movie set decades before the 2009 Star Trek movie, which I think technically takes it back into the prime timeline because the timelines don't diverge until Spock's ship comes through. Um, it's said to be this is said to be much further along than the Star Trek Beyond sequel. So we may see this movie before we see a Star Trek 4, I guess as we're calling it. And then the other movie that's in development is a standalone movie that's been in development since 2021, being written by Kalinda Vasquez. And there's not a whole lot known about this movie except that it like introduces a whole new cast. It's not a uh, it's nowhere tied to anybody we already know. So, but other than that, what do you think? There's a lot going on in the movie department.
As someone who's kept up with a fair amount of interest, I always keep my anticipation on Star Trek movies really close to the chest because I keep getting announcements that then fall through. Like we only a few years
For
ago, yeah, we were only a few years ago talking about a Tarantino Star Trek film that fell through. I'm happy to see another Kelvin movie. Like I like the vibe that they hit. I don't need it to all conform to the original timeline. I I'm a little confused as to where they're aiming the story for Star Trek Origin. Not because I don't understand like what time period they're putting it in. I'm just how are they planning on marketing that if they're really just trying to set it before the Kelvin incident, if they're not just making another Prime Universe
well,
Star Trek movie?
yeah, there's a lot of people who speculated on that movie. It's like, is it basically kind of an Enterprise movie in a sense? Is it that era of Starfleet, decades before 2009, which is like Kirk era? So are we getting back into the Archer era of things? Maybe it's that Romulan War that happened, that back in that era. It could be a lot of things, or it could be none of those things, and just a whole new thing. It seems like they want to go make some new movies and really try to set themselves apart from some other stuff to hopefully. I think the idea is that they do need to bring new blood into this 58-year-old franchise, and so movies are a good way to do that. They did that pretty well with 2009 Star Trek. They brought a lot of new people in, and I don't. They've done that to a certain extent with the new TV shows on Paramount Plus, and then they've not. So I think the idea is grow the franchise.
Yeah, which I'm all for. Like, if there's a good story that requires them to work in that time period, pop off. Tell that story in that time period. And I'm really happy. I'd be really happy to see if we get a larger cast of faces and possibly a larger round of new people entering the fandom. Hollywood tends to be a really good distributor of American culture, and Star Trek is. It's not that it's been out of movies for quite some time. It's just we haven't really had that good cultural purchase since like before Nemesis.
Yeah, agreed. Well, moving along with all of our Star Trek news, we've got our first look, and it's only a picture, uh, from the Section 31 movie, which just wrapped filming last week. So we know they're done filming the movie. And I guess we have, like I said, an image, which looks very kind of Mad Max-ish with whoever Giorgio is talking to in this picture. I don't know if that's supposed to be a Klingon or, there's this mohawk looking thing and there's a metal piece over it. I don't know.
It could just be a cyborg. We've seen a lot more of them
Yeah.
in the Discovery era than they ever used to show.
Yeah. Or this could be some random scene of her in a bar having a quick whisper into somebody's ear who's not even a cast member of the movie. So I think the bigger piece of information that we got that really I think might be one of the most exciting pieces of news we got out of today was that the Casey Roll, I'm guessing that's her last name, who was previously announced as a cast member of Section 31, has been identified that she is playing the role of a younger Rachel Garrett, who everyone knows, who, if you're listening to this podcast, you must know that she was captain of the Enterprise C and only seen in one episode of Star Trek, yesterday's Enterprise from season 3 of TNG. And of course, her famous statue from episode 1, season 3 of Picard, the Red Lady. So that really points us that Section 31 is going to take place during the Lost era of Trek. Natali, what's your reaction to that?
Well, having seen this actress in her previous work in The Magicians, I was really excited about this casting. And then I, as a huge history nerd, love that any expansion we can get on the Lost era of Star Trek, where we have the maroon monster minus the undershirts or anything, and it's this period where a lot of things happen, but we never see it. We always get told about it. The Treaty of Alderaan, the conflict with the Romulans comes to a head, and then a treaty is formed, and all of a sudden the Federation is banned from cloaking devices for the foreseeable future. But that's just one of a dozen incidents we get referred to happening in this time period. So anything that I see coming out of that makes me happy, and especially in reference to like a Section 31 where it's very spy, very backstabbing, because Giorgio's not going to be a nice person. We never want her to be a nice person.
No. So, yeah, very, like I said, I think this took many people from being just casually excited about the Section 31 movie to being all about it. And I think the news was right to drop because, like I said, now everyone's really like, oh my God, this movie, I got to see it now. And before it's like, oh, it's going to be this little, little tribute to, Giorgio, Section 31. It's almost like it was a contractual obligation because they had announced the series that they are not making. But yeah, we're all stoked for this now. Trek social media has been abuzz with this.
Well, and also the buzz is, and this was partially touched on in the article, they kind of want to see how well this does to see if they can also get Michelle Yeoh back for later movies.
Perfect segue into our next slide. Yeah, Alex Kurtzman, who is like the head of Star Trek right now over there at CBS Paramount, they're considering more streaming movie concepts. I guess these movies are much cheaper to produce, obviously, than anything that you're doing big budget for, the movie theaters and whatnot. So if you think about it, I think they filmed Section 31 in about 6 to 8 weeks of filming, which is really fast. And it's basically like almost like a double episode. Some people are not even referring to them as movies. They're calling them long treks. I'm like, I think it's a little insulting. I think it's a movie. I'm calling this a movie. They're calling it a movie. I'm calling it a movie. But yeah, they're already talking about if this does well, there may be a possible Picard follow up, not calling that Legacy, but, Picard follow up. And then they're also talking that Michelle Yeoh has already expressed interest in a sequel to this movie. So I guess we're not going to kill Giorgio right off the bat. We did that once already.
We are not contractually allowed to kill Michelle Yeoh at this point.
No, and they'd be dumb to do that. So, yeah. So good news on. I mean, and I would like. I don't mind this format of movie. If we're gonna, these little one-off stories, that's fine. We don't have to. Not everything has to be a series. Movies are great, and if the movie does well, that's great. Maybe you could do a sequel, or then you spin it off into a series if you have a really good premise set. But otherwise, I'm here for the format. I get it. Maybe that also leaves the door open for different talent. Not everybody wants to commit to a series, but they'll do a movie.
Well, they
All
proved
right.
that really well with the short treks. So I think that's where we're getting the sort of derogatory sounding long treks. I think a few feature lengths will really prove well with the Star Trek format.
Yeah, I just feel like you're doing it a disservice calling it a long trek or something. Like it doesn't, like it's not a real movie because it's not in the movie theater. Well, most people didn't go to the movie theater to see Star Trek Beyond. That's why we've been on freaking hiatus for this long. So, people need to knock it off. Most people didn't go to the movie theater to see Star Trek Nemesis, and that's how we didn't get the follow up to that. So,
Oh, be more ruthless.
do you know me?
We've met.
Yeah. Little update on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. They have built an all new set for season 3. It's Spock's lab, and it's sitting on top of a giant tank of water, which already has fans speculating that are we going to see a live action cetacean ops? I don't know. I really don't want to see a live action cetacean ops, but hey, they built a cool set, so hopefully it's going to be something really cool. Hopefully the water means something. Like, why would you build something on top of water unless it really has a purpose to serve from the science nerd in me, other than the fact that it looks cool?
Yeah, everything in a starship should serve a function, but I've also grown comfortable with the fact that the sets on Strange New Worlds are gigantic.
Yeah.
Gigantic.
Which we know that Enterprise is not that big. So like, where are you putting all this stuff? But
yeah, are all the lower deckers in the Enterprise just in like in a tiny bunk bed?
yeah. Well, we've seen the inside of Discovery too with the turbo lifts and all that bull crap. So, we know what's hiding in there. The other thing is Jonathan Frakes just wrapped up directing an episode, and he's calling it the best episode of Star Trek he's directed yet. So that's coming high from somebody like Frakes, who's directed many a Star Trek episode and some really good ones, and a couple of bad ones like Sub Rosa.
Oh, Sub Rosa's not bad. I mean,
It's camp.
it's camp.
Like, I can watch it for the campy factor, and I'm good. But I don't watch it as like, I don't watch it because it's purely entertaining and it's, deepening my understanding of Star Trek.
Well, I will always take Jonathan Frakes being excited about his own work with some anticipation. I mean, everybody does some stinkers, but I usually enjoyed Frakes' work in the past. So him being that ecstatic about this episode has me really hyped for it. Also, I just noticed is that looks so what we have on screen is Spock's new lab, and is that costume the like biohazard suits they used to wear in the original series that looked like they were made out of curtains
from the Naked Time?
Yes,
that is a evolved, updated version of that. Like, if they were to make that back then, this is what it would look like now. Kind of they've done with other things. So yeah, it's it looks really cool. So, I am a little pleased, not a little, I'm very pleased to hear that everyone's really excited about season 3 filming, and the reports are that everything's going great. Sometimes if a show takes too long of a break, because season 2 wrapped a long time ago from an actual filming standpoint, if it takes too long a break, then sometimes, time, you kind of lose your mojo, right? You lose that charisma that the team has together. And if the team doesn't come right back together and fall back into form, somehow something feels like it's missing. So it sounds promising that everyone's really excited about the work that they're doing in season 3, and that we also unfortunately learned that season 3 will not premiere until sometime in 2025. So there will be no Strange New Worlds this year. So we're just going to have to get by with Disco, Prodigy season 2 at some point, and Lower Decks has season 5 coming up. And we'll probably, I'm hoping, they haven't announced it, but I'm hoping we'll see the Section 31 movie in the fall.
I'm hopeful as well. And also, the amount of post-production that science fiction takes, if they tried to push this out at even the end of this year, I would just look askance at it and go, one single mess up is going to throw that schedule. And also, that's completely unreasonable on your visual effects people just to try and meet a 2024 release.
If we get all of Prodigy season 2 this year, which I'm pretty sure we will, you're still going to get 40 episodes of Star Trek this year.
Yeah.
And a TV movie, So I'm not mad.
Oh, I am anything but mad. We are getting so much Star Trek.
Yeah,
we are. So much.
Well, speaking of Star Trek, of course, and what comes after Disco, we got two big pieces of news out of Star Trek Starfleet Academy. We finally got confirmed for sure that Starfleet Academy is set post-Discovery in the 32nd century. It's basically taken over the former home of the Star Trek Discovery filming sets in Toronto's Pinewood Studios. It's the biggest soundstage in Canada. The series is expected to film on the largest single set ever created for a Star Trek television show. And I think previously that set was the Deep Space Nine Promenade. But basically, I'm just going to read this so I don't mess it up here. Plans include the series' central academic atrium, a sprawling two-story structure that will include a mess hall, amphitheater, trees, catwalks, multiple classrooms, and a striking view of the Golden Gate Bridge in a single continuous space. To fit it all, they plan to use every inch of Pinewoods, Toronto's 45,900 square foot soundstage. I mean, that sounds ambitious.
It sounds ambitious, and I want to see how they wrangle like filming from the different angles. Like that was the very first thought that came to mind, because when you build a set that big, you also have to account for how and where you can shoot and see different parts of the set without like revealing the backdrop, as it were.
Well, yeah, and I'm just wondering, like, are they going to be using AR walls to augment? Are they, you know, I don't know. It sounds pretty incredible what they can do here. It does sound like a huge, like, hey, they're putting their money in they're putting some money into this show. And I guess if you build this one big set and almost everything is going to take place there, then that kind of makes sense. But um, yeah, it's a lot. I'm getting a little more excited about this show. My only hope, I guess, or I want to throw out there is that it doesn't feel too cheesy, too CW, that it really feels like Star Trek, and it's not like just like this cheesy teenage romp to try to get kids involved.
Um, I agree and disagree only slightly, because I just want it to feel like these are people of that age moving about the world as they actually would. Because some of the things that Star Trek has done is kids acting way, way beyond their age because they're being written by adults.
Right. Yeah, true. And or prodigy children like a Wesley Crushers and things like that, which, it tend to annoy people because like, but if they're kids with kids, it might be more palatable. And not kids. I think, to be fair, what we call kids, I mean, in a Starfleet Academy, most people, cadets, would be 18 or over. So
Yeah,
if
and
it looks a little bit more like the actors we saw in the first Duty TNG episode, the Nick Locarnos and whatnot, that yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm asking for, I think.
yeah, and I'll definitely agree with you in that I'm not looking. Well, I don't really think that they are aiming to do something CW esque.
Yeah.
That's almost a specific style now, and that's just that sort of interpersonal soapy style storytelling has never been something Star Trek's done.
Yeah. Well, I just look at like Titans, if you watch that on with DC, whatever, and it's on Max now. There was four seasons of it, and it started off very cutting, very edgy, very oh my god, like oh Robin just swore and blah blah blah, and then it evolved into CW antics, and it was like what? I feel like I'm watching like Batwoman or Supergirl or
Uh, as
that
someone
kind of
who As someone who loved Supergirl, I will definitely admit Titans started out strong for me, and then it just got like, okay, why am I watching this as opposed to Supergirl? What are you
yeah
doing? What are you going to do different? With Starfleet Academy, I'd like, what are they going to do different than have if it's going to be more of a static setting, like they tried with Deep Space Nine, then they're going to have to find a very good set of compelling stories for their main cast. And
yeah.
that's what I want. So these are going to start out as cadets a few seasons in. Like, are they graduating?
Yeah, I think we heard a little bit about they are going to progress. They will intro. You will see some students keep going. They'll introduce younger new cadets as they go. But of course, we're also like assuming that this show does well. It keeps getting renewed. We see multiple years, things like that.
I'm manifesting Degrassi for them then, because
Okay.
Degrassi, for all of its CW-esque antics and its like high school teen drama-ness, it proved that you can create a cast and slowly transition members of those cast out and introduce new characters in without losing your core audience.
Yeah.
Because if so I think Starfleet Academy can do it. They just have to be smart about it.
Yeah, and there will be an adult cast to this show too that we have to remember. So
Well, we were just talking about the fact these are adults. We'll just have to have like who are our professor figures? Who are our like figures of authority?
Exactly.
Are we going to have? Are we going to? Well, it's the 32nd century. We're only likely to see Admiral Vance as possibly a continuating character. Maybe Tilly.
Oh, yeah, I think those are your two. And then basically anybody from Discovery could be.
That's true, but we also have to remember this is set post Discovery, and we don't know what the end of Discovery looks like except that epilogue.
Yeah. Well, just remember, Discovery wasn't filmed to end. They found out after the fact. So
yeah,
I think everyone makes it out for the most part. So almost, like your Sarus and your Stamets and all of them. I think they'll be available for Academy, and you could almost see a Stamets becoming a professor at the Academy, right? In fact, I think he talked about that when he was going to leave Discovery to go teach.
yeah.
Wasn't that? Yeah, that was supposed to happen at one point. I think in season 2 or something like that. So,
As long as we have a giant gold statue of Miles O'Brien, I'll be happy.
That would be crazy. I'm all about it. All right, and our last piece of news for the week is that streaming all 20 episodes of season 2 on France Television and other public networks. So basically, we have learned since then what was being called a leak over the weekend and caused quite the controversy with the likes of Aaron Walkie and the Hagelman brothers, that French television has in fact acquired the rights to seasons 1 and 2 of the series on French territory as part of a contract with Paramount. This is therefore not a leak, but rather a diffusion with a contractual framework. Their rights go until 2028 without exclusivity. The series is available on Oku, I'm probably bad. It's probably some French word that I'm saying real long. Oko, the French television's youth platform, and France TV, a generalist platform until the end of the rights. No linear broadcast plans linear broadcasts are currently planned. And boy, I apologize for just botching that, but whatever. So basically, it's on TV in France and it's legal. It's not being taken down tomorrow. They're there now. Many people, if you understand French, you now have seen season 2 of Prodigy. If you want to, many people are using VPNs and whatnot and have already watched it. I haven't. I saw a little clip of the ship flying, and that's it. I have no desire to try to watch it. I don't believe it's subtitled. For me, if I'm not hearing Admiral Janeway being voiced by Kate Mulgrew, that's part of what I want to see in Prodigy anyway. So trying to sneak a look ahead, I think is only going to take away from the impact of watching it the first time. So I'm waiting for Netflix. Natali, what do you think of all this craziness?
I have several thoughts, so I'll start with the positive. I'm excited for Prodigy season 2, and like you, I'm not going to watch it until it comes out on Netflix. But I think this is a lack of this is bluntly a lack of negotiation acumen on the part of the licensor.
Yeah.
Because it very obviously created a lot of confusion, and the France.TV response is just like this is what we have without exclusivity, and this contract goes through 2028. We're not doing anything wrong, and they aren't.
Yeah. I just think, to your point, when this contract was written, somebody forgot to dot the I and cross the T about, well, this needs to be a timed release globally with, Paramount's other licensees like Netflix and whatnot, so that, they dropped at the same time. Sounds like that was not done. So basically they were free and clear to put it out when they were ready. And fine, that's fine, and it's out there. I don't think this hurts Prodigy in any way. I just think it makes Paramount look stupid.
It makes the property of Prodigy look extremely low priority. This is already a property that was plagued with will they, won't they, cancel it. We finally got confirmation for a season 2, and then it gets pulled off of the primary distribution platform within the United States. We are left in limbo for months until we finally find out Netflix is going to get it. And then we don't even have a release date for Netflix. And correct me if I'm wrong. I do not know of one. And all of a sudden it's going through a French distributor in French with no subtitles, which I'm not sitting here saying it has to come out in the United States first or in English first, but like you said, they obviously didn't pay enough attention to their contract negotiations, or they don't care about a global timed release, and it just leaves the fans in a lurch, and it makes it look like they don't care.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I don't think they do. I mean, Prodigy got saved. I mean, they got their money for season 2 of Prodigy, obviously, or whatever. They recouped it by licensing it to Netflix. The fan outward was huge. I mean, the only way you're going to see a season 3 of Prodigy is if it does so good on Netflix that Netflix tries to buy a season 3 from Paramount. The other part of that being that even if you buy season 3 at Paramount and you get the order in, like, they've already disbanded the production crew of Prodigy. They've had, season 2 is wrapped. The artists and the talent is already moved on. They're looking for other jobs. They're doing other things because they basically did the first 40 episodes of Prodigy as a multi-year job. So that crew was working together for several years making Prodigy. And so we've already kind of missed that, where a lot of series would have got their green light for another season and they just would have went into production on what would be season 3. It could take up to 2 years after a green light of season 3 to get season 3, like on the safe side of things. So, I mean, ultimately, Prodigy is going to have to really defy all odds on Netflix, I think, or that will be the end of Prodigy.
I am not optimistic for a season 3 of Prodigy as much as I love season 1, and I was one of the naysayers when I was originally seeing it. But like you said, this is an issue for animation. Once you disband the team, or once you they're starting from worse than scratch. They're starting from the drawing board, and it takes years from a green light for storyboarding to get to the finished product.
Yep. So,
I think even at its height, when Cartoon Network had a lot of its own in-studio stuff, you're talking about an 18-month turnaround.
Yeah. it takes a little while. It's a lot goes in. It's funny. They say it's cheaper, but it does take longer. um, but that's the way it goes. So yeah, I mean, Prodigy's been great. The only good thing is I do know that the way season two ends, based on things that were said a year ago, that it does have a nice end to it. So that could be the end of the show, or it could go further. It could you could take it either way at the end of season two. So at least it won't be like, oh wow, that show just kind of ended and it never had a finale or didn't have a, it didn't feel like it cohesive ending. So yeah, I'm predicting. I guess the last thing I have to say about Prodigy is, I am predicting that maybe this might get it out sooner. You know, I would hate to see it come out in April and really kind of get in the way of Discovery. But you know, Netflix I don't think is beholden to anything, and they can go do what they're going to do. Maybe if they just time it just right, so as Discovery's ending, they drop it. That would be kind of nice. It just kind of keeps Trek going.
I think that would be the smartest move at this point, just based off of how things have gone. I just don't have a lot of faith that the smart move is going to be the one that's made just for Prodigy. And like you said, Netflix isn't beholden to the same release schedule as Paramount Plus.
Yeah. All right. And our final little news bit of the week is a very, 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 very fun one that I kind of lost my shit on yesterday. Um, some screenshots from a Hallmark catalog are making the rounds, and you can't even really find this on the internet. It's like literally screenshots. But it's for this year's 2024 Hallmark ornaments. And Beverly Crusher is finally, after all these years of Star Trek ornaments, and people, they started Star Trek ornaments when TNG was still on TV. Um, and they've been making them ever since. But Beverly Crusher is finally getting her own ornament, and boy, they looks like they've done it right. Her lab coat is flaring, and it's season 6, season 7 Beverly hair, and I'm all about it. We're also getting a Captain Pike in the captain's chair. To complete our Enterprise ornaments, we are getting the bee. Our own Kelvin speculated that would be for the 30th anniversary of Generations this year. And another Spock and Data ornament. Go figure.
Yeah, talk about overrepresentation on that last set. But it looks like it's
Yeah.
from Reunion, which is Reunification, which is
Yes.
yeah, because that's definitely Spock in the Romulan outfit with the aggressive shoulder pads.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also the Keeper, one of the guys from Talos 4 or whatever, which is cute. And I think there's some mini ornaments this year. I think the Enterprise A refit or the Enterprise refit is one of them. And there's some other very small ornaments this year. But like I said, this is all kind of leaked. So although it's all, I think, legit, after I did a little Googling, it seemed like there was already this leak of Beverly like a month ago, but it just didn't catch the Star Trek viral wave that it did yesterday. So yeah, kudos. Finally getting my Beverly ornament.
And she's got all the drama you need.
Yes, exactly. All right. So I think that's kind of our episode. Any final thoughts, Natali?
No, it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for coming on this week. Yeah, that was a lot of news to digest, but we made it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my.
I keep forgetting to use that.
You
we would love
guest and do it.
Oh my.
We would love to hear what you thought of today's episode and hope you'll join our Facebook group, the BQN Collective, to continue our discussion there. Hey, you can also find us in Discord now. The BQN Network is in Discord. We are having a really fun time over there. Davey Willett has gone above and beyond getting us all organized. So come on over to Discord and find us. We're pretty chatty over there, and we're growing by the day with our BQN listeners. You can also find me on Instagram at What's the TBev, or leave a comment on YouTube if you are watching this episode. Please hit like and the subscribe button here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a star rating and a written review. That helps others to find the show. So, Natali, where can people find you?
Mostly I hang out on Instagram, which I have a really interesting handle. It's at Cackling Hyena, because I am both a pie-obsessed baker and I like hyenas. It seemed like a good portmanteau. I don't have like a YouTube channel anymore. I was going to try and do a baking one. So really, it's just Instagram.
Perfect. At this time, we would like to thank our associate producers, Davey Willett, Jason Anderson, and Matt Harker. If you would like to keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. We will add you to the Hive Mind Facebook group with a monthly subscription of $5 or more, or you can join you can join our meetings on the Hive Mind Roundtable discussion on the second Saturday of each month. Visit patreon.com/BQN to get all the details and watch your messages. And also, listeners, you heard me talking about Let's Fly, our Discovery post-show filming, which will be broadcast, I believe, live on Fridays going forward. I think that's at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern US. Patreon members get first crack at actually being guests on that show with some of the BQN hosts. So that is another perk that's out there for our Patreon members. Thank you for listening. We'll hope that you'll join us next time for more tea on What's the Tea, Bev? Live long and prosper.
What else can you listen to on the BQN? Replicate yourself a mug of hot chocolate and join Amy, Mark, Christos, and Kelvin as they discuss everything and anything in the Star Trek universe on All Good Things. Boost yourself with an energy drink and join Davey on YouTube and Twitch for reviews and live streams of classic, cheap, and sometimes more recent video games on Bargain Bin Gamer. Brew yourself a pot of coffee and join Jeremiah to discuss Star Trek Voyager on The Captain's Couch. Mix your favorite cocktail and join Mark and Matt at Cinema Z to discuss the films you probably missed but should definitely check out. Pour a cup of tea, Earl Grey, hot, and listen to Stephen and Keith as they discuss the next generation of Trek on Galaxy Class. Get yourself something caffeinated and learn an interesting bit of history with Chrissy and Jason on History with the Zloggies. Have a bowl of Flo-Meek soup and join Thad and Chrissy and a guest to discuss new episodes of Star Trek as they are released on Infinite Diversity. Have something to sharpen your mind and put your Trek knowledge to the test with the Treksperts quiz. Take a bite out of something that didn't seem edible and join Kyle, Kevin, Amy, and Haley covering all things in New Trek, including that show that is Trek in all but name, The Orville, on Union Federation. Get your Sunday brunch ready for The View Screen, a live weekly talk show hosted by Kelvin and Amy with featured guests talking about all things Trek. Pour a glass of wine and spill some tea with Christos, where he discusses current Trek news and events and explores the world of fandom via guest interviews, all with an LGBTQIA+ perspective on What's the Tea, Bev? And Patreon members get to pass around that green bottle of Aldebaran whiskey once a month on the round table, and they can listen to It's Green with Mark White and Amy's Math Moments.